Now, chip off the old block.
Yeah.
Isn't she just?
She's a chip off the old block. She looks increasingly like him in the pictures she got yesterday.
Now, I wasn't referring to her looks.
Oh, were you not?
Ladies' looks. I was referring to her actions and her court action against the Criminal Assets Bureau. Let me have a look at her yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah, she does have a look of him, doesn't she?
She does have
I mean, you wouldn't walk past her on the street and not know.
Yeah.
So I've had a few interactions with Tracey Gilligan over the years. And funny enough, they've always involved her rights and money and what she's entitled to and this, that and the other.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Tracey Gilligan, the daughter of John Gilligan, because she's issued proceedings over the Criminal Assets Bureau involvement in her social welfare applications. She has been refused her disability benefit.
Yeah.
And other benefits since June.
Yeah.
And she appealed it and that decision was upheld in November. So now she's suing CAB, is it?
Well, she's seeking
the High Court to intervene.
Yes, the High Court to intervene. Yeah. And the High Court did intervene and said she has a case that can be argued effectively. But, I mean, it is incredible. It's, 2024 and CAB proceedings... CAB versus Gilligan is still ongoing. It is quite stunning.
Extraordinary. So Tracey Gilligan would be in her early 50s at this stage.
Yeah.
Her father's is about 76, 77, is he?
I think he's mid-70s anyway, yeah.
70s. So Tracey's one of the two Gilligan children, we'll call them.
Yeah.
Herself and her brother Darren, who has had issues with addiction over the years. And he has a couple of kind of convictions, small fry stuff relating to probably addiction issues.
For the most part.
Yeah. There's no evidence that Tracey herself has any addiction issues or ever has had in her life. She's the mother of a number of kind of grown-up children now. I think she's one young child whose father is Spanish. And she has lived between Spain and Ireland for the past 3 decades.
For the past 3 decades, absolutely. I mean, like the CAB proceedings, of course, the existence of CAB in the first place is intimately connected with the Gilligan story. Like, obviously CAB was set up in the aftermath of the murder of Veronica Guerin, probably because of the grip that John Gilligan and his gang had taken on Ireland's criminal underworld, the amount of money that they had made, and
were openly flaunting.
The flaunting of that wealth. Famously, John Gilligan built a kind of an equestrian centre in Jessbrook in County Kildare. And after Veronica Guerin's murder, all of that started to really become into the public mind, and people were outraged, I think it's fair to say. John Gilligan had bought this huge property, but he'd also bought a number of other properties where his children were living. And so Tracey Gilligan's name, as a result of those investigations, started to become public.
And to just place ourselves back there for a little moment in 1996 when Veronica Guerin was murdered. At that point, Tracey Gilligan was an adult. She was in her 20s. She was a mother.
Yeah.
She was in a relationship with a guy called Liam Judge, who hadn't at that point died.
No.
Her father was the owner of a pub called the Judge's Chambers out in Alicante. And Liam Judge was sort of down as the official owner of that, even though it was always suspected it was Gilligan drug money that bought it.
Yeah.
So Tracey Gilligan was possibly living out in Spain at that point, but she's always been between Spain and Ireland.
Yeah.
Liam Judge would have been more her father's era.
Yeah.
But she was in a long-term relationship with him.
Yeah.
And when her father was returned from Belmarsh prison in 1998 to Ireland under extradition proceedings to face trial initially for the murder of Veronica Guerin, which he was acquitted of, and he was found guilty of drug offences and got a very lengthy sentence over 20 years. She went on to sort of continue to protect the assets of the Gilligan family.
Yeah.
That Spanish pub and a number of villas were suspected by the Irish Gardaí to be owned by Gilligan, even though they weren't necessarily directly in his name. And Tracey was living in the villas and was obviously in relationship with Judge, who was the named owner of the pub. So she was also back here in Ireland. Now, she never would have grown up in Jessbrook, or she never would have really lived there.
No.
She grew up in Ballyfermot herself and came up when the father was kind of making his way as a criminal through armed robberies, and kind of more violent really than...
Yeah, I mean, John Gilligan, obviously, as he spoke about recently himself, would have been in and out of prison, mostly for robberies, big scale robberies. But it was obviously when he came out of prison after serving a lengthy sentence, and he got involved in the drugs business. And he went from being sort of, having a good bit of money if a job went well, to becoming a multimillionaire in a very, very short space of time. So Tracey Gilligan absolutely was not raised as the daughters of other drug dealers who might go to private schools and be raised in plush circumstances. She was raised in ordinary circumstances.
She wasn't raised in wealth, and I'd say life wasn't easy. He was always and remains an aggressive, volatile little thug. He has since separated from her mother, Geraldine. Geraldine herself is quite a forceful character. Yeah. Not dislikable.
No.
But very much a forceful character who has fought against the system as well, and fought hard to keep hold of the assets that the family acquired through drug dealing. But yeah, I mean, I think probably as a father figure, John Gilligan wouldn't have been a very good role model, obviously.
No.
And I think he would have been quite a formidable character. But Tracey herself has sort of gone on to emanate him nearly.
Well, I mean, emanate him maybe in terms of her personality.
In terms of her personality, and in terms of her demand for her rights, and in particular, in her demand for her rights around social welfare and what she's entitled to.
Yeah.
She has always sort of been... I think that would nearly have been, I can only imagine growing up in that household, that was a mantra coming from the father, John Gilligan. They were always on welfare, the family.
Yeah, I mean...
despite the money he was making from criminal means.
Yeah, I mean, and remember, like, John Gilligan fought this incredibly lengthy, often representing himself in his legal battles with CAB that went on and on and on. I mean, an incredible cost to the state. I think it was worked out at some point at millions. He fought tooth and nail for every inch of those properties. And eventually, they were seized. Tracey Gilligan had, obviously he had acquired this wealth. There was a number of properties, as you spoke about, in Spain. Liam Judge, who was her boyfriend at that stage, he passed away of natural causes.
When did that happen? That was maybe about 2000.
Yeah, it was after John Gilligan had been extradited back to Ireland, as far as I remember. But he died of natural causes. But Liam Judge was always suspected of being a money launderer for the John Gilligan operation. He was much older than Tracey, and had been, he was certainly at the time he was being referred to as a bagman for the John Gilligan gang, although admittedly never received those types of convictions. So Tracey Gilligan would have been in and out of court, of course, over the years with John Gilligan, mostly when John Gilligan was in prison, and she was part of the battle to hold on to those assets. Now, CAB are a different beast, I suppose, than the criminal justice system, as he's spoken about before. And one of the tools that CAB have, and one of them that they use quite regularly, is to do with social welfare. If you look back on CAB's annual reports, most of it you'll get the headlines, which is they seize this luxury mansion there and that luxury mansion there. But you'll also see a huge section of where they look at social welfare of people involved in drug dealing and their families and girlfriends. And that is one of the tools that CAB use to target, to make it uncomfortable for people to live off the proceeds of crime. And in the course of those investigations, what they'll do is they'll look at somebody's bank accounts. They'll see money going in and out. It doesn't necessarily have to be huge money. And if that person is also receiving social welfare, and all of a sudden you see them taking big holidays, all of a sudden 3 or 4 grand comes into an account, which probably maybe wouldn't be justifiable pursuing a criminal case to do with money laundering, they can stop social welfare. And it's actually a big deterrent because, drug dealers, for example, if they have a girlfriend and a mother that are kind of living off a bit of the proceeds, even if they're not involved in the criminality, knowing that CAB could come after your social welfare can really disincentivize people to start spending, you know?
Mm-hmm. So Tracey Gilligan she was registered, I think, at a house in Ballyfermot, and her brother was registered at a house in Lucan, and they were two of the properties that the Criminal Assets Bureau went after.
Yeah.
But realistically, she had spent a lot of time, as we said, out in Spain. Now, it was 2003 when Liam Judge was found dead in a house in Torrevieja.
Yeah.
And it's the Torrevieja area that the Gilligans settled.
Yeah.
So that caused a bit of a problem because there was some stuff in his name. There was some properties, some companies, etc. in his name where it was believed a lot of the Gilligan money was being laundered through.
Yeah.
Now, I do recall at the time the Criminal Assets Bureau started going after him, and Felix McKenna would have been the second chief of the Bureau, and speaking to him, and he was talking about how they had contacted the Spanish, and they had sort of gathered what information they could in Spain. At that point, they had no reach into Spain to the assets in Spain. They could only go for what was here in this country. But they did seek help.
Yeah.
And I remember him saying to me that unfortunately at the time, the Spanish had bigger fish to fry, and that was often the case.
Yeah.
You know, that Costa Blanca and the Costa del Sol is full of criminal gangs, massive criminal gangs from all over the world. But Gilligan was seen as a bit of, a nothing. So in actual fact, luck was on their side because the Spanish didn't go after the properties, but nonetheless, 2 villas in Torrevieja and that pub, the Judge's Chambers. So that was from about 2003, and Judge himself was believed to have died from a heart attack due to this hedonistic lifestyle he lived out there. I'm no doubt Tracey Gilligan was devastated by his death. He was buried back in Ireland. And it seems to me that around for the next 10 years, she's still out there in Spain. She's sometimes back in Ireland. I'll bring you up to around
13 or 14.
Yeah. And at that point, the Criminal Assets Bureau case against the Gilligans was still ongoing. Geraldine was living down in the bungalow at Jessbrook.
Yeah.
The
other section had been seized, but they stayed in the bungalow.
They stayed in the bungalow, and she told me herself at the gate there one day, they'll take me out of here in a box.
Yeah.
That's what she said. But anyway, we're up to 2013. Gilligan is in prison.
Yeah.
Was due to be released maybe around 2014, but nonetheless, he's still there. And I got word that the Judge's Chambers pub was for sale. Now, I think it was maybe 2014 when we went out to Alicante, and I think he might have been released in 2012-13, so he was definitely out. But I was told that Gilligan was back over in Torrevieja and that he was trying to sell the Judge's Chambers pub. And we set up a sting.
Yeah.
And created these 2 personas of Russian mafia types.
Yeah.
One was actually Polish.
Yeah.
But they didn't know the difference. And we rattled up basically and rang the number.
Yeah.
That was outside the pub on a piece of paper. Ring a mobile phone number if you're interested in buying.
Yeah.
And there was no point in going in any other way because the only people that were going to try and buy a property in those circumstances were going to be...
Yeah, because loads of journalists had rocked up to the Judge's Chambers over the years, hadn't they?
Tried to say, how much is it for? And they would say it wasn't theirs. Anyway, this sting was, created under good advice of people that knew how the Gilligans would bite. And sure enough, they did. And it was Tracey Gilligan, disappointingly in a way, that was sent up to deal with my 2 Russians.
Yeah.
We were trying to draw out John Gilligan at that stage, but he was too cute, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So she went to meet the Russians, and we videoed her, and I wonder where that video is.
It's still there somewhere,
It's still there somewhere. We should pull it out. But they offered, they had a client, they said who was interested in buying the pub. How was she willing to sell it? And she famously asked for 450,000 of the black money, she called it.
Yeah.
So she wanted cash.
Yeah, cash, yeah.
So, and our boys were willing to pay that. So they were getting into negotiations. But at the time, she was talking to the guys who were all wired up and all the rest of it. So I have all the recordings. But I remember being struck not only by the fact that she was looking for the black money for the pub, and that she said she said at the time that she was the owner of the pub, and that we did try and say, could we speak to her father? And she wasn't having any of it. And she eventually did smell a rat. She stopped meeting us after about 2 or 3 meetings. But during one of them, she was shooting the breeze with our Russians and was talking about how she spent the summer out in Spain. She was selling the pub really because, she just didn't have the time for it, that she wanted to go back to Ireland. And the reason she was back in Ireland was because we had the free education.
Yeah.
And that just stood out for me. I was like, these are people who've creamed the system.
Yeah.
And here she is out in Spain. She had 2 villas at that stage, she told us, and she was selling 1 villa on top of the 450 she was looking for the judge's chambers. And she was coming back for the free education, provided here by the state, by the taxpayer.
Yeah.
And it irked me, I have to say.
It did irk you. I do remember that. But she's back now. She's been back a number of years. Her address given in the court proceedings is
it Roscommon?
Roscommon.
Yes, because I remember going down to that house after they were kind of evicted ultimately from Jessbrook.
Yeah.
And she got a truck and went down, and we actually followed her all the way to that house in Roscommon.
Yeah, and so she has lived, and her solicitor was making the clear point that she's nothing to do with criminality. At this point, absolutely no links, which I think is fair enough to say. But she's battling with CAB because the evidence is heard that it is probably an unusual situation that CAB can intervene directly with social welfare officers. They effectively went and looked at her bank account at one stage. They saw a movement of 30,000, which Tracey has explained that went to her daughter. That's the explanation she's given.
And where did the money come from?
Well, I don't know if
she said it was maintenance, I think, didn't she?
Yeah, but you said some of the money came from maintenance for a younger child, and she also spoke about loans to friends that were repaid, and she said she has no money in her Spanish bank accounts. So her point, I suppose, is basically because of the nature of CAB intervening directly, there's no mechanism for her to appeal these judgments, and that's what she's seeking to do to the courts. I think she has had some route of appeal. It gets very technical. And that's where the Gilligan empire is, I suppose, isn't it?
John Gilligan, of course, they remain like in a close relationship with her father. I don't think they've ever fallen out. I don't think Geraldine is much in touch with him nowadays. And she, I have to say, was not a person without charm.
Yeah.
She was what she was. She was never embarrassed about being John Gilligan's wife or about his relationships in the aftermath of their marriage or anything like that. I don't know where Geraldine Gilligan is. No. I mean, she was certainly living out in Spain for a long time after he was jailed as well. But like, there's a whiff of John Gilligan off this. John Gilligan sat in jail all those years and sort of saw himself as a bit of one of those jailhouse lawyers. He read through every piece of paper, thinks he's extremely clever.
Yeah.
And believes he knows how to beat the system, even though it has repeatedly beat him. But there's a whiff of kind of him there going after this way and using the courts and...
Yeah, there's a whiff of it, absolutely. I mean, like social welfare is not a huge amount of money, and, obviously going through court, appearing in court, all of that is very stressful. It's
like social welfare by its very nature is what we provide for people who can't work for various reasons.
Yeah.
And it mightn't be a lot of money, but to some people it's their lifeline. It keeps them alive and it keeps them housed and all that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. And she
is on disability benefit, obviously has been for years, and is absolutely, furious that anybody should take that from her because it's her right to have it.
Yeah.
Now, her father, when he came back to Ireland after being out in Spain for a period of time, he of course was shot after he got out of prison, went to the UK under the protection of associates of the Dundons and hid out in halting sites in the UK for a long time as he got better, and while the threat from the Kinahan organisation died down, or he managed to do whatever he did to negotiate in the background with that. But he came home here to Ireland and made a big thing about putting his name on the housing list.
He did.
Because he believed he deserved a house from the state.
Yeah. I mean, look, it is a mentality that, Ireland is mine and it owes me a living, I suppose. And, of course, people are entitled to social welfare. They're entitled to the same as any other citizen. And I suppose that's her point. But yeah, look, it's a funny type of way for the Gilligan empire to end up at, though. I suppose I wasn't, social welfare is a small amount of money, and that is
it's a small amount of money if
But if you consider
if you consider where they came from, exactly 100%.
That's what I mean. So they came from this. I mean, like John Gilligan was living like some sort of landed lord in the country.
Yeah,
I mean, really, like living in this incredible opulence, like some sort of gentry, and it's the empire has shrunk and shrunk. He certainly thought he was, and you could see that in his most recent documentary, which was a series of little stories about how clever he was and how he beat the system, and ultimately they beat nothing.
Listen, tell me what he is.
Well, I mean, I think he's what's called antisocial personality disorder, I would have thought.
And narcissist?
Well, a narcissist, people with antisocial personality disorder would have narcissistic features. And I think when you can look, this is only amateur diagnosis.
Oh, okay. Absolutely, sorry.
Absolutely.
Warning, yeah.
But I mean, a lot of people who reach the top of the criminal ladder would be capable of being diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and that would have narcissistic features. So, where they would have a lack of remorse, a sense of entitlement. I think with that John Gilligan documentary, which was ultimately quite unflattering of him, why he invited that in, that would be an example of a sort of narcissistic view in the Trump-esque, except, yeah, without Trump-esque, absolutely. I mean, even the fact that he must have.
Did he think he was going to come across as a likable guy?
Well, I think that would be part of the thing, that they always think they're smarter than the other people, and they're always going to be able to put one over. And also the fact that, instead of being a guy in his mid-70s going nowhere in the middle of Spain, probably without 2 pennies to rub together. Instead of that, he's a man who's featuring in the documentary. Even if it's negative, it still makes him into somebody. And it's,
There's such an arrogance to somebody who thinks that whatever they say, you will believe because they said it.
Yeah, but there's also maybe a lack of an ability to perceive other people as being real, because that has to be associated with that as well. Where you look at, you don't imagine the other person properly. So you don't. I
mean, you even your honesty when you say something, and it's true.
Yeah,
you can often struggle for people to believe what you're saying is true, and all the backup you have, be it through your career, and you know what I mean. Say in journalism, for example, that you've had, you've worked for decades. You hope you've got a lot of things right, and you hope that people think when you say something that you have backup for it, and that you're not just spoofing, basically. But at the same time, you always feel that sense of, I hope people believe what I'm going to say here.
Yeah, but that's because you're not fully antisocial.
I don't have a fully antisocial.
You're fully there. You did a little touch.
Yeah.
No. No, but so the problem with people who have that temperament is that they can't imagine what the other person is feeling. Yeah. Who's receiving that.
So they can't imagine the other person doubting them.
Kind of, not really, because the other people maybe don't exist as technicolor. Do you know what I mean? They exist as just don't exist in the same way. So when you're telling somebody something, you're automatically putting yourself in their head. Even on a podcast, you're thinking, how will this be received? And you can imagine what somebody else might feel, but some people can't really do that. And because people don't fully exist for them, I mean, this is probably...
We're really out of our time.
We're gone. We're gone deeply.
What are those sort of, mindful podcasts called?
No, but I mean, antisocial personality disorder, or people with that antisocial temperament, forget about it even as a disorder. So a lot of criminals would fall into that category. And one of there's loads of key bits to it, but some of it is like a sort of a low boredom threshold, a need for excitement to feel okay.
No, I have that.
You do.
Right, those
but
two
you're
bits.
not going to shoot somebody in order to be less bored. You're
no, I'm not. I'm not, obviously.
So, but there is a bit of that.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a low boredom threshold, and then also this kind of, a lot of these criminals get in trouble with this he disrespected me or all of that. And it's,
just cannot cope with that.
They cannot cope with that feeling.
Yeah.
And so therefore they do anything but feel that feeling that they're dismissed or, and that's what a lot of...
But isn't it interesting, like the energy that it must take to now, look, Tracey Gilligan believes that she deserves her social welfare, but I mean, we're talking a bit more general than just directing it at Tracey Gilligan. You look at the energy it must have taken for John Gilligan, for example, to have taken his case, his fight through the High Court so many times, into the Supreme Court, onto the European Court of Justice. He has cited as human rights being, everything. But the energy it must take to continue that battle against society and against those sort of rules that have seen him devoid of assets here in this country and left penniless here in this country. Not so in Spain.
Yes.
He must like the Spanish system a lot more. But
and they were also, that's not even including all the criminal appeals.
Of course
he went to. So but look at it this way, right? Say Barry Young, who pled guilty really early, probably got his sentence halved or whatever as a result.
10 years he got.
Something like that. So to say could have got twice that. Pled guilty within 6 months and sort of apologised nearly in court, and he'd be done and dusted. So at that moment, Barry Young has chosen to feel really bad, probably. Do you know what I mean? He's sort of not humiliated himself in court, but in that world maybe where he said, I was anxious all the time, and he gave an explanation. So he's felt admitted being powerless at that moment. With John Gilligan, I think all of those court appearances, ultimately they'd never succeeded. They never put him in a good light. But through all of that, he avoided feeling powerless.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Even though it damaged himself in the long run. And that's a sort of an analogy for criminality in general, to an extent where people are doing things in the short term, even though they, on some level, know the long-term consequences are not going to be good.
And I mean, you can see that, I talk about that sort of energy he has, and you're talking about the antisocial personality disorder. And, there's no changing somebody like that, clearly. That is something that is in him so deeply. He's been through prison. He's never shown remorse. All of these things have happened against him because of his actions. And yet he still feels empowered. He's come out. He's gone back to Spain. He set up another drug business there. Mickey Mouse sending stuff home in the post or whatever. But nonetheless was making some money out of it. He's faced down the system there again. He thinks he's beaten it because he didn't get a custodial sentence. And he's back doing whatever he's doing out in Spain. And he's in his 70s. And he will be like that if he lives into his 80s. He's somebody that it's ingrained in him. Is there anything that can...
Of course, but it has to come from the person themselves. Yeah. Like Tony Blair at one point, and again, like we're suggesting
what
that...
would you call us? We're very amateur.
Yeah.
Very amateur psychologists.
But I mean, obviously John Gilligan has an antisocial personality, not necessarily a disorder, because of his actions. And he's explained it through poverty and things like that. But I mean, also part of what he spoke about was domestic violence in that programme, a lot of other things. But I mean, Tony Blair at one point wanted people who are diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder to be locked up in advance of them committing crime. Do you know that?
Right, Tony Blair.
Yeah, well, that Labour government, now they were quite reactionary. So there was a belief that these people can't change and they're always going to do something. But people, of course, with any type of personality or disorder can change.
And there's different levels of all of those things, I mean, there's people functioning outside of the criminal underworld with that. Oh, look, I mean, do you know where the biggest number of antisocial personalities, they say at the head? Media.
No, but they actually say the head of Fortune 500 CEOs. Like they're a range of antisocial personalities. So absolutely, politicians, business people.
People in power.
Full of them. People that pursue power at any cost.
You have to believe that you're worthy of power, I suppose.
No, I think what underlying it is this feeling, I'm not good enough. And in order to feel okay, you have to be dominating other people. So I think there's a duality there where...
But I don't think everybody in those very powerful roles within companies or in the world feel unworthy. I think a lot of them feel totally worthy, and that nobody will do a better job than them, and they're very focused on getting to positions.
But I bet you if they can switch between also feeling, really, really bad, because I think in order to be so ruthless, like there has to be underneath it all has to be the fear of feeling powerless and
failure.
Yeah. And how like normal people fail, it's not nice, but it's not the end of the personality. Do you know what I mean? I think with some people, if and you can see the that if they're made feel bad, they'll do anything but feel that. And so,
how much should we charge John Gilligan and Tracey Gilligan?
Well, I don't think they're willing to. A bit of black money will do.
The black money, I think.
No, I don't think they'll. But look, Tracey Gilligan is also a product of her environment.
You see, that's what I was saying to you at the beginning of it. I mean, Tracey Gilligan has got this sort of elements of her father's personality to her. That belief in her entitlements, that sort of anarchy against civilized society to an extent, but she came out of somewhere that you can see was that domineering force of her father, who has that in spades, rearing her and not being there for periods of her life, and no doubt being there for periods of her life. He is a violent man.
Yeah.
And, he talked about domestic violence in his home. We have no evidence of it, but, he would be somebody who maybe could lash out in his own home environment.
No, he did. I mean, he spoke about hitting.
He did speak about that.
He spoke about that during the program. Hitting Geraldine. So she was raised in that, raised with a belief that the state was a bad thing.
Yeah.
Raised with all those things, and in fairness to her, her life has been.
She has become
because of her
figure because of her father.
Because of her father.
I've spoken to her a few times, and she would communicate with me a bit. I mean, she might send me an email after this, and she'll be angry.
Yeah.
But you kind of get the impression from Tracey Gilligan that you could sit down with her and have a chat, and she'd be really angry, and she'd be somebody who'd have a lot to say on a lot of issues. But I don't think she is her father.
No, I don't.
I think there's something more to her. Maybe the mother was a different character, and maybe there's a bit of the mother in her or something. But she might be somebody that subconsciously tries to be him, but I think underneath it all, she seems to have been a very dedicated mother. In fairness,
I think that's true. And I think that is one thing. She seems to have, that she's given her kids what she probably didn't have from her father, which was loving,
stable,
loving
environment. And she certainly seems to do a lot for them. And, I'm saying that about the education, the free education here and all the rest of it. I mean, at least she was coming back to give them an education, and maybe to try and change something for the next generation. We've no word of John Gilligan, or we just don't care about him anymore. Is that it? We've no interest in him, really. I mean, people sometimes contact me and say they've seen him here, there and everywhere. But
I think there was some pictures recently put on TikTok there was a TikTok put up from some guy. I think he was in somewhere in Spain, and he walked past John Gilligan in Spain, and there you go, John.
Yeah.
And John waved at the camera.
Bit of a little local celeb.
Well, I mean, I think he was just a tourist who spotted him. But I mean, I think that's really what he's reduced to. I mean, it's nobody fears him or, is mad to talk to him, or, he's.
There's been a lot of, back in 2003 when Liam Judge did die. That was around the same time that the Westies, the notorious grouping, Sugg and Coates, Shane Coates and Stephen Sugg, who had set up and established an incredibly dangerous drugs operation in the Blanchardstown area. They had gone to war with some of their own previous, bit of a familiar story there, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they had made their way out to Alicante in order to set up, they believed they could take on Spain, and they could do that. They were linked in with the Gilligan mob that was left out there, and Tony Armstrong in particular, Fat Tony Armstrong, another fat guy. And, they went missing in Alicante. Were they found in 2003, or did they go missing in 2003?
I think they went missing, and then they weren't found for a number of years.
They were found buried under concrete in Cattrall. But they were involved with the Gilligan operation, and some associates of his who were still there. There still was money in Spain. He was in jail, but there was still money in Spain, and it was still a wholesaling operation.
Yeah.
It's hard to kill, isn't it? The whole thing. It's like trying to stamp out a cockroach.
It is hard to kill. I mean, they're you refer to John Gilligan's operation as a Mickey Mouse one, his most recent one, and it was a bit Mickey Mouse. It was, cannabis and prescription medication being sent into post, like not sophisticated. We've had guys flying in planes with drugs, but he was still capable of turning over quite a lot of money in that way. So there's always an attraction. You're not talking somebody, millions or anything like it, but people
all he knows, maybe. And
it's all he knows. And there's enough, even a few thousand a month is still a lot of money relative to sitting on the dole. So there's always going to be an attraction, and people have drifted off to various places in the world. There's not a lot of social welfare in Spain. So I think that idea of a
can they not claim the social welfare in Spain from Ireland? I mean,
no, I don't think so.
Well, I suppose maybe if you're not, supposedly, if you're still having a address back here, and plenty of people who've done that.
But I mean, it's that attraction of just being able to make that amount of money that you can live without financial concerns.
The likes of John Gilligan give, so many people who have to live on social welfare, you know what I mean? They give people... It just gives it all a bad name, doesn't it? And really, it is such a vital part of a democracy that those who can get out and work are willing to hand up taxes in order for the survival of others,
Have you ever been on the dole?
I actually haven't.
No.
I've never been on the dole, but I do. I really believe it is such a vital piece of
it is. I mean, I was on the dole for a few months, a few times.
Yeah.
And it's a tough way to live. Yeah. I mean, it is a tough way to live. You really, there's no struggle like it, But
that's the point of it. The likes of you who can work and have worked, it keeps you going and keeps food on the table and a roof over your head while you're aspiring to get more work, to get you back into the system. Disability in particular, there's people on disability who simply cannot work.
No.
Because of mental health issues or other physical issues or whatever. And they need to be supported and should be supported by society and by those who can work.
Yeah.
And then you have these people who are just screwing the whole system.
Yeah.
And, giving a bad name and giving us a reason to give out about the dole and all. That's why it gets me, I think.
I think so. I mean, look, the great case was... and we just spoke about it recently, Anita Freeman, Sean McGovern's partner, as he had this incredible wealth washing through the system. And she was continuing to collect, I think it was disability as well, while living with him in the same house that they'd bought through some dodgy fund in Mauritius.
With Kinahan drug money.
Yeah, so, I mean, look, that nobody thinks that's okay,
No. Indeed. So anyway, Tracey, if you're listening, please be gentle with your email. I just had to bring all this up and talk about it. And, as I said, I do think that underneath maybe a tough persona, I don't think Tracey is her father.
Yes, and don't listen to my medical advice.
Yeah. Right. We shall regroup. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.